Chapter 2, The Grotesque Sublime. Saigo, god of death, rose from his throne and peered across the subterranean hellscape that was his Death Vale. This place was his home, and yet it grated at his vision. Death was indeed dark business, but the balance of life and death held a necessary weight, which meant light was just as important as shadow. But here, in the grotesque sublime, darkness radiated outward like a sickness, and light was a rare thing. Saigo had noticed recently that the darkness seemed to fluctuate a little more often than usual, like waves rippling across the Death Vale plains. Where was it coming from? Death lived inside Saigo's spirit, but even he knew that waves of secondary darkness were not something about which to become excited. He watched the landscape spread out in front of him, his view of this realm of the after, his black as night eyes searching for dark waves. Spirits floated here and there. Pose, Rengo called them. God of spirits, Rengo reigned over all souls that filtered into the Death Vale after their bodies were abandoned, and only their essences remained. They could not communicate, and hovered like mere lantern lights in no discernible pattern. Yet Rengo treated each of them as his children, somehow able to assess their individuality. Saigo had never had the pleasure, not that he cared much. His own responsibility for them ceased once their death was accomplished, though if one were to give him a name, he could track it down. Saigo sensed a distinct presence behind him, a familiarly wild one. He raised his hairless head a little higher as he felt Hamet stride up beside him. Hamet, unabashedly shameless, the most intrusive of his lesser gods, and the most unruly. She often went her own way, made careless choices on a whim, and came back whistling with joy about it all. Her vanity was particularly irritating, and yet the goddess had also served as a strong foundation for the eccentric group of higher beings overseeing this Death Vale. She had perhaps the most innate knowledge of them all regarding how the surface worlds operated, but Saigo still rarely trusted her.
Your presence is stifling,
Saigo quipped, refusing to look her way. He could just see her ink-black curls peeking into his periphery. Each of the gods here chose their own facades. Hamet's the most startling, with her wild hair and pale blue eyes. She was a fire, always raging, and yet her stare could freeze.
You jest with me, Saigo,
Hamet drawled. Her flirty tone irked him, but he did not fight it. Though gods had no use for lovers or relationships beyond camaraderie, she tended to act quite human when it came to how she connected, and she'd always had a certain affinity for him. He found it annoying at best.
When will you allow me to sit?
She asked with a pout.
when all worlds blend into one.
He retorted with a bit of sarcasm he knew she'd enjoy. Curse her curiosity. She'd always a strong desire to sit upon his throne, a symbol of his divinity and leading role among the group. Saigo knew if Hamet had her way, she'd steal his position in the space of a second.
Have you come only to beg for my throne? Or have you any news?
She giggled like a little mortal schoolgirl.
I only wanted to cast my gaze upon you, God of Death. You thrill me, after all.
Saigo rolled his eyes. Her demeanor then morphed into something more solemn, a rarity for her.
But I do arrive with news. The timeline I've been monitoring. Things are picking up.
She was a wild card, but when it came to her lines of time, she did not play.
Do enlighten me.
First things first.
She replied, leaning into him.
tell me a secret?
It was a little game they occasionally played, and Saigo knew it was frivolous, but it encouraged her to be more forthcoming with information, so he more often than not bit her lure when she cast it. He let out a sigh of compliance and finally turned to gaze into her icy eyes. One of her brows raised slightly in invitation. The trick to this game was letting her in on something about the Death Vale that would not make it vulnerable to her whims, but would satisfy her taste for knowledge, a nearly impossible task.
There are creatures that live in the far reaches of the realm, where none of us have ever trod. Ones that live in full darkness, grow mutated limbs, and eat the flesh off of each other. Rabid and wild. Like you.
Hammett drew in a breath at his little compliment, and it was true. There were indeed creatures of darkness that lived somewhere deep within the Vale. He had seen them, but he would not divulge that to her.
Life in the Death Vale?
She asked, wholly fascinated by the idea. Indeed, Saigo had no clue how these monsters had evolved in a place that was supposed to be devoid of life. But he had a theory.
Perhaps they are not alive as we know alive to be. We do not fully understand their purpose, but I believe they are something else. Something other.
Her gaze melted, and Saigo knew he'd given her just what she wanted. He had to admit, sometimes he felt some satisfaction as well when he saw the joy in her face, but he only allowed it to overcome him for a moment, turning his gaze stony again once the feeling passed. She gave him a half smirk.
Well played, God of Death. You certainly know how to woo a girl.
Will you just...
I'll tell you, my impatient one. It is a line of time where my darling Yoki lives. The magic is gathering in hot spots, causing odd things to occur and strange monsters to appear. It is a dark energy. It positively reeks of death. I figured you'd like to know, given it's your department.
She winked at him. Yoki, her prized mortal. Saigo's mood further dimmed at the mention of his name. Yoki was one of those rash decisions Hammett had made not too long ago. She decided for the first time in history, as far as Saigo knew, to phase a mortal from one line of time to another, effectively making him the most powerful mortal to ever live. Whether Yoki realized this was yet to be revealed, but Hammett certainly had not foreseen the consequences of such a choice. Saigo had been waiting for the ball to drop with that one, and perhaps it was finally time.
Your poor decision-making has come to bite us, Hammett. You've disturbed the entanglements, as I told you when you confessed to me what you had done. And now, your favorite little world will pay for it, I am sure.
Disrupting the magics holding the foundation of a timeline together was never a good idea. She should have known better and just allowed Yoki to die.
Oh, Saigo, you've made that world pay for it 100 times over, and it has still survived. You just don't understand. He is special. He will not be a destructive force. If anything, he will be a hero of legend.
There was only one hero of legend. The rest are copies born of an ancient curse, and Yoki far from qualifies.
Saigo had strong opinions about this topic, and they'd argued their validity until words no longer felt effective. But here she was still, convinced her precious Yoki was going to do great things. But the truth was that she had simply stolen a potential death from Saigo, allowing the man to live.
I don't expect you to comprehend it. A god fully focused upon the endings. I am a purveyor of endings and beginnings. And continuations. Trust me, Saigo. Yoki is a bright color in the drab gray.
Saigo was done with Hammett's distractions today.
Enjoy watching your timelines fall apart, Hammett. Just do not deprive me of the death I require. This veil is not yours to command.
Hamet only smirked at him again.
Of course, Your Eminence.
He refrained from rolling his eyes once more, knowing it would only fuel her amusement.
Just be prepared is all I'm telling you. I may have deprived you of one death, but I'll be making up for it with thousands, if all goes as I expect.
Psycho assumed it would not. Rengo crouched to watch the floating Poe waver in the air, comparing it to its neighbor, a fully formed spirit. He'd been seeing this more and more lately. Swaths of Poes losing their opacity, seemingly fading away, and much less responsive to Rengo's voice. His voice was the only one here that could reach them, and he knew them each intimately, as friends and allies. But many had lost the ability to hear him, and his concern mounted now as he stood with a frown and placed a hand to his chest.
Please come back,
He whispered. The Poes were intermediary beings, remaining in the Death Vale for merely a short while. Their leaving was supposed to be instantaneous, not a fading goodbye. Rengo was to facilitate their exit from the realm, but if his voice could not reach them, this could not be accomplished. And then, what would happen to his fading friends? Where would they end up? He had to figure this out. Back at the Citadel, where Rengo's fellow gods took up space and served the realm, he found Jinsei in a courtyard, throwing a small, spherical object up into the air and catching it as it came back down. His slight, thin frame jumped in celebration as he caught the object. Rengo was unaware what level of celebration catching a sphere warranted, but Jinsei's demeanor leaned more carefree than the others. If one wished for laughter, Jinsei would grant it. And despite his smallness and blithe manner, he tended to break through much of Rengo's muddled mindset when he required it. Jinsei spotted him.
How goes it, Rengo? Have your Poes told any good jokes lately?
He asked, tossing the object again. Poes did not tell jokes, but Jinsei had been teaching Rengo to create his own jests as an exercise for his mind. Dealing with Poes on a regular basis tended to create a fog in one's head over time, even a god's. This was Jinsei's way of helping, and, surprisingly, it did seem to. Rengo forced himself to ruminate. He remembered Jinsei had once told him that something called a punchline could be most effective. The pub formula was a common one, so he decided to try it now.
2 Poes walked into a pub. One asked the bartender for...
He began, but hesitated. Jinsei raised his eyebrows at him.
Gem?
Jinsei let loose a burst of laughter.
A gin!
He corrected.
Yes, a gin. The other Poe asked for a rum and milk. After a few drinks, the Poes became so very drunk that the bartender cut them off and said, I think the spirits are getting to you.
He grinned, expecting Jinsei to eject another round of raucous laughter, but instead was met with silence and a grimace.
Not funny?
He asked with a frown. Jinsei squinted, as though attempting to find the right words.
It was, better than your last joke? What was that punchline again?
Goat feces.
Rengo replied matter-of-factly. Jinsei grimaced once more.
Right. Yes. This one was better. Good job.
Rengo's grin returned. It felt good to learn things, even if they seemed frivolous at first. But Jinsei, his facade resembling a teenaged Hylian, held so much more worldly knowledge within him that Rengo just had no access to on his own. Jinsei was the god of life. His entire scope of existence was to return surface beings from the Death Vale to the world of the living again. This did not happen often, nor did Jinsei take the power lightly. Its purpose was mainly to facilitate the continued valor of legendary heroes. ensuring they survived long enough to accomplish their very important missions. Rango and Jinsei worked together in such cases. Rango felt a kinship to the god of life, one that he did not experience with any other god here in the Death Vale.
You seem like you have other things on your mind.
Jinsei said, disrupting Rango's thoughts.
Yes, I do, in fact. Something is going on with my pose. They are fading.
Greetings, gods of life and spirits. The dynamic duo. Are you two never apart?
Hamid's crooning voice took over as she waltzed towards them from the direction of the throne, Rango noted, before he could defend her claim that the two of them never left each other's sides. Ridiculous. Rango was most often with his pose. She continued to speak, taking a seat on an ornamental bench. Jinsei resumed tossing the sphere, rolling his eyes. Hamid's presence was not often welcome.
I've just come from Saigo. The god is getting balder and shinier by the moment. Do you know he still blames me for phasing my Yoki? It's so very rude of him, don't you think?
A gossiper, Hamid was. Rango suspected she'd picked up the habit from the surface ones she liked to spend so much time monitoring. As the goddess of timelines, she did possess much responsibility, not only over lines of time, but of the beings that lived in them. Their actions had far-reaching consequences for timeline health, which she must work to mitigate. However, it was Rango's opinion that she spent far too much time simply observing them, even in their most intimate moments. She spoke of it often, but Rango could not agree with the god of death more. Hamid had made the decision to destroy a timeline, an unprecedented choice, and while Sago had approved the act because of the influx of death he had received from it, as well as the danger it put the Vale in, he did not approve of her rescuing a magical mortal and phasing him to another line of time. In doing so, Hamid had instilled a lot more power within Yoki, a dangerous amount. If the mortal ever discovered this, every timeline would be subject to peril. But she did not seem to think this an issue, and consistently protected Yoki from Saigo's threats of death. Saigo had even instigated a civil war in the timeline, hoping Yoki would be caught up in the violence. But Hamid had somehow steered the mortal toward safety for a full decade. Yoki was indeed her favorite, but she also kept him locked in a binding life contract, restricting him in many ways. Rango thought it impudent. Mortals were supposed to have free will, even in the face of gods and their overarching rule. But these were all opinions. His responsibility went only as far as his precious pose, so perhaps he should not judge as much as he tended to. Regardless, he could not help speaking up.
Rude, perhaps. But perhaps not, Hamid. Saigo is the wisest of us all. It would do you well to remember that.
Hamid let out a belligerent guffaw.
Sanzai is wiser than all of us combined, including Saigo. It would do you well to remember that. The goddess of existence does not even share the full scope of her power. Why do you think that is?
Because even she can't explain what she does.
Jinsei said, bouncing the sphere on the ground.
It's the most useless power ever.
Things exist, alright, cool.
Who cares?
Jinsei's attitude tended to come out a little more when Hamid was around.
Jinsei, the adults are speaking.
Jinsei stuck out his tongue at her.
I am sure Sanzai's power extends further than we know, yes. But our god of death oversees this realm, Hamid. We must abide by his rule. It is the three who decreed it so.
It was Hamid's turn to roll her eyes.
Ugh, don't get me started on the three. I will never forgive them for what they will do to the god of law. The poor beast, stuck at the bottom of the ocean. No one to keep him company. The stories he has. I must visit him again soon.
Saigo has forbidden you to visit him. He is a traitor. He will try to kill the goddess Hylia. And you risk timeline disruption by moving through the time dilation.
Rango's emotion was ruling him, he knew, but this vexed him so. While Hamid had the ability to move through time, she wasn't supposed to unless absolutely necessary. But to use that power to commune with a disowned, traitorous god? Unseemly. Hamet threw her head back in exasperation.
You are all so irritatingly pure. What's a little rebellion? It hurts no one, and he's my friend. And don't you go tattling, Jinsei.
Jinsei bounced the sphere and ignored her.
There are more important things happening right here in the Vale, Hamet. Perhaps you should spend a little more time protecting this place with us. We are supposed to be a united front.
Rengo, please. What is there to protect? This place is an empty landscape, full of nothing but dreariness and boredom.
She languished on the bench, stretching her long limbs and sighing with angst.
I could make this place so much more fun.
Jinsei made a noise of agreement.
She's not that wrong, Rengo.
Rango gazed at both of them with shock.
How dare you, both of you! I have tens of thousands opposed to protecting this place. The importance of that cannot be overstated.
Ugh, you didn't even know them in life, when they had spark and potential. All they are now is a sad poof, a blue flame.
She waved her hand around in the air, mimicking his precious pose. No one spoke this way about his family.
I challenge either of you to understand a spirit's steps. But of course, you can't. They respond only to me, and they are fading away as we speak, disintegrating. I don't know what's happening to them. Your impudence is startling and offensive. And Jinsei, I am perturbed at your agreement with Hamet. Of all the gods.
I mean, the pose are cool, I guess. But I just don't get the hype.
He shrugged.
Now, when they come back to life, that's something.
They just did not comprehend the importance of the pose, of Rango's relationship with them. They likely never would.
You are both being rude.
He pouted. Hamet sighed.
I am so very bored.
Then get up and do something, goddess.
A full, confident voice commanded. Sanzai appeared before them, her tall figure emanating a strength that could not be ignored. Her Gerudo-inspired facade was a sight to behold, no matter how many times they beheld it.
Your bickering can be heard from clear across the citadel. What is worth this madness, Rango? You look miffed.
He could not stop from frowning in disgust.
These gods have no respect for my power, Sanzai. Hamet especially. And my pose are fading. No reason is apparent to me.
Hamet has no respect for anyone. Why don't you all take your leave? Rango, I shall find you later and we'll figure out your Poe problem.
He wanted to protest, wanted Sanzai to punish Hamet for her insolence, but decided against advocating for that just now. She was right. It wasn't worth the trouble. Rengo and Jinsei went their separate ways, but Rengo delayed around the corner as he realized Sanzai had asked Hamet to stay. He shouldn't eavesdrop, but after Hamet's despicable behavior, he couldn't help himself. The two goddesses stood a few feet apart, sizing each other up. Hamet had never much questioned Sanzai's authority, having always looked up to her for her distinctly mysterious power. Rengo understood that she simply wanted to know what Sanzai was capable of, and how Hamet could take advantage, but Sanzai was too intelligent to allow that to happen.
You look well, Sanzai. How's business?
None of yours. Arousing distress amongst the gods again, are you?
Hamet chuckled.
When it suits my mood, yes. They are, oh, so easy to drive to insanity, you know. Especially Rengo. It entertains me so.
Saigo says you've been pestering him for his throne again as well. Do you have such a level of ignorance that you cannot see how obvious you're being?
Oh dear, is Saigo upset with me?
Hamet made a faux whimper of guilt.
He is almost finished with you.
Hamet did not reply, and shuffled uneasily where she stood.
You need to give him some space, Hamet. Go to the surface world and cause your trouble there instead. We have things to figure out here, and you are breaking too many boundaries. You may keep Saigo amused and at bay with your flirting, but that tactic cannot last forever. He is at his limit.
Fine, I will go if I must.
She said with a sigh.
But let him know I'll be checking in on my Yoki.
Rango couldn't see her face, but he imagined she had given Sanzai a cheeky wink with that comment. Sanzai did not reply, and Tomet took her leave, swaying her hips. She was insane, immature, maddeningly so. So much so, it made him want to—
Rango, I know you're there.
Whoops. He emerged from around the corner sheepishly.
I am sorry, Sanzai, but she irks me so.
For the first time since she appeared, Sanzai smiled brightly.
I know just what you mean, but Rango, always remember, when there is a meeting, a parting shall follow. It just takes a third party to instigate it sometimes.
And I do appreciate it, goddess.
She nodded to him.
Now, tell me more about these fading poes.
As the gods and goddesses of the Death Vale went about their business, far off in the distance and unbeknownst to anyone in the realm, except for one strange loping creature with hundreds of eyes dotting its face, a pebble pumped into existence.
Chapter 3: The Pearlescent Line. It is a fascinating experience to be mirrored. It was 2 weeks before I opened my shop when it happened. I was writing in my journal, trying to make sense of the hierarchy of the gods, when I felt a sudden pulling of my insides, as though I were being magnetized, attracted to some other unseen force. Merely 3 seconds it took before I realized what had occurred. There had been a timeline split. Before my phasing, I would not have been able to sense this. I could feel myself separated, split off into another direction. An older version of me, sent on a different path. I was so sure of its occurrence, so certain that for an unknown reason I had been split in two, mirrored into another existence, that the decision to attempt to phase myself was an easy one. It had all led here. Hamet's decision to save me, my life in Hyrule, my research. I knew I could not bring my brother back on my own. I did not have the power to do so, but there was someone who did, and they lived in the Death Vale. Deep in the recesses of one of the ancient books I'd acquired, I had finally found mention of the god of life, Jinsei, after successfully translating a certain passage. For a god with such a power, I found it riveting that he was not given more of a spotlight. It felt as though his existence had been deliberately hidden. There was written merely one short paragraph describing his purpose. 3 sentences that finally confirmed what I had suspected true for years now. The passage read, "The god of life known as Jinsei is responsible for the necessary act of renewing souls to their living skin. No other god possesses this scope of ability, and Jinsei's light-hearted spirit reflects the life he so graciously chooses to restore. Aside from renewing the lives of heroes of legend, it is said Jinsei has only granted one life renewal at the pleading of a mortal, though no record exists naming the requester or the recipient. Only one. I did not know the circumstances of the request, but it did not matter to me. It only mattered that Jinsei had granted it, which meant, God's willing, if I could convince him, he may grant it one more time." I stared now at the empty space where the pebble I had phased no longer existed in my reality. The feeling of confidence that soared within me. I could not explain it adequately with words, but it swelled within, and I knew that it was the first step toward my ultimate goal. Soon, quite soon, I would be the very first living visitor of the Death Vale. The song of phasing took about a month to perfect. Phasing a pebble was easy. A person required a lot more dedication. I worked on it on my off time. Every second of it I could scrounge. The shop was gaining a fandom. It seemed the little boy in green had been a domino, inspiring the rest of the children of Castletown to finally take a courageous step inside, despite what all of their parents were saying about me. I now had several clients, mainly jovial children, who actively traded masks for me. So far, all of them had brought back the appropriate number of rupees for each mask, enthusiastically so. The boy in green was the only client, however, who had finished the trading adventure. Except, not in this timeline. I didn't know how I could sense it, but I knew that my other self, my mirrored self, had been through 7 more years of time than I had. 7 perilous years. And had seen the boy trade every single mask, earning the reward at the end, a quite sacred one I'd procured. I also knew that this boy was special. Special in both timelines, but having only accomplished his true destiny in one. I felt that he had experienced some sort of time manipulation as well, though there were not 2 versions of him that existed. The confusion all of this provoked racked my mind on the regular. What chaos had caused this timeline split, I'd no idea. I thought perhaps Hamet had something to do with it, but I did not feel her presence at all. It almost felt as though the split was fated, and had nothing to do with me, the only person in history to be phased as far as I was aware. From what I had learned about my research on gods and their doings, they induced constant movement in the background of the everyday lives of mortals. Pieces of a giant puzzle were consistently spun around, raised and lowered, jumbled, locked together, broken apart. It was a significant and persistent dance, that of the gods, one that mortals simply could not and should not comprehend. But I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to, and I was overtly determined. I sat at my desk in my humble loft, silently appreciating the quiet life I had cultivated here, as I did not know if I would return to it, and hummed out the final notes of my song, envisioning in my mind the place that I'd only ever seen described in vague paragraphs within ancient fading tomes. A dark place, an arcane one, full of death. At first, I felt nothing, but then a tug, a whisper in the air, an otherworldly whirring sound, a stretching of my mind and soul, much like the experience of Hamet's phasing. I whispered to myself a phrase I'd been repeating for 10 years, to remind myself that I still had purpose, that I would see my brother again. Parting need not last forever. And as I took my next breath, my lungs filled with the salty brine of ocean water. At some point during childhood, one must learn how to hold one's breath. It is odd to consider. Breathing is such an innate skill, one we learn as soon as we are exposed to the air for the very first time. Our bodies instinctively understand the process and commit to the labors of breathing until we no longer can. When my mother asked me to teach my brother how to swim, he did not understand about holding breath. I had to teach him the skill, and because breathing was so ingrained in his young form, he could not fathom that sometimes he may need to go against the very thing that kept him alive. It was the only thought that coursed through my brain as I kicked my legs and attempted to orient myself, searching for the surface. A growing need for breath overtook me, as my lungs were already full of water. They spasmed and expelled the fluid, but without the ability to take another breath, I was already near death. Imagine, I finally learned to phase myself after a decade of research, and this was how I would go out? I had sent myself to my own doom. But then, a shimmer of light above me. Sun. I propelled myself upward, craning my neck to burst through the surface as quickly as I could, the light dimming as my consciousness ebbed. A world of fresh, salty air greeted me as I inhaled it with desperation. Then, hacking up the remnants of liquid, I treaded the water, squinting to see what was around me. All that was visible in every direction was ocean. I attempted to wipe the saltiness from my eyes, but only made the stinging worse. I panted, a certain fear making its way to my center. The realization that I was stranded in the middle of a watery grave, no land in sight, began to choke me worse than the water had. I knew that I had to swim if I wanted to get anywhere at all, but had no inkling of which direction to choose, and I was utterly alone. I do not know how much time passed before an odd sound behind me corrected that notion. A sort of creaking noise and the whoosh of waves. I turned to see an enormous ship easing its way towards me. Straight towards me. I would be crushed or drowned by this mammoth of a boat if I did not get out of its way. I swam, but not fast enough. Sputtering and choking on seawater, I screamed my presence, and a sailor gazing through a sort of spyglass seemed to spot me.
"Man overboard!"
he yelled. A commotion raged upon the deck, and the ship slowed. An anchor launched over the side, thankfully far from my struggling form. It was becoming harder and harder to keep afloat, my muscles failing me. But a spark of hope lifted my spirit. These gracious sailors would be my rescue. They came abreast of me and let down a rope ladder. Clawing at it, I bumped the hull, trying not to be sucked beneath, but successfully clutched it and climbed. Weak I was, but so desperate to remove myself from the freezing sea. I used every ounce of strength I had left and reached the railing. A gaggle of men grabbed me and pulled me aboard. Only now did I notice their countenance and demeanor. Clothing ragged and worn, tattoos etched rudely into leathered skin, sharpened swords sheathed in belts and hard stares. I gazed upwards toward the black and red flag that waved in the wind at the tip of the mast. These were not sailors at all. I was aboard a pirate ship. I had collapsed upon the deck, my breathing rough and my body soaked. The pirates huddled around me, appraising me, some simply curious, others viciously distrusting. One of them squatted to give me a closer look. He snarled, making a show of grabbing the short sword at his side. He stunk so dreadfully of sweat and fish, I wondered if he'd ever had a bath.
"Well, ain't you a lucky chap?"
He began.
"Could have been a flopping fish for all we knew. Good thing you hollered so high-pitched like, though I was expecting a little girl rather than a fully grown man based on that scream."
The other pirates let out a squawking round of laughter. He began to poke and prod at me, searching for pockets.
"Now, don't know how you ended up in the middle of our territory, but it don't much matter if you got anything good."
I backed up against the hull, shivering as the cold air and fear began to set in. "Do not touch me," I warned. I knew I could not fight these men, weak in state or not, but I hoped my voice held at least some conviction. They only cackled again.
"Oh, so the wet fish has some gumption. Aye, boys, perhaps he'll be useful after all. Get the shackles. We'll make him our little errand boy. He's got 2 working arms and legs after all. A lot more than the lot of ya."
They continued to laugh as several pirates broke off to fetch the shackles. I heard them rattling towards me, while the men continued to rile themselves up, yelling obscenities and promises of horrible actions they would have me perform. The smelly pirate leaned in close to me, his breath adding another layer of stink to the mix. His expression grew serious.
"We need to know you're gonna cooperate, fish. Only one thing you gotta do to prove it."
A round of eyes from the group surrounded me. He grinned, revealing a row of yellowed, chipped teeth.
"Lick my boot,"
he commanded, pointing at the most disgusting, fish-gut-covered, muddiest boots I'd ever seen. I recoiled, and he stood and drew his short sword in response.
"Go on now."
"I will do no such thing!" He lunged, grabbing the back of my neck and forcing my head to the deck. My face hovered an inch from his boot. I almost retched right then and there. Hands grabbed my arms and constrained them in the cold metal shackles. I could not fight them, not even a little. He held the tip of his sword to the nape of my neck.
"Do it."
I still refused, until I felt the sword cut into my cold skin and saw blood trickle onto the grimy deck. This is what it had come down to. The end of my life, a sour, unwashed existence, serving evil pirates who only wished to humiliate me. But what other choice did I have? I could phase again later if I could get a moment to myself. I needed peace to concentrate. This chaos would not do. But I could escape this unjust imprisonment. I had to try for my brother, but it meant I must play along for now. Slowly, I eased my mouth towards his nauseating footwear and shut my eyes tight in preparation as the group's exclamations grew louder. The smell wafted into my nostrils, prompting involuntary gags, and I braced for impact.
What's going on here? What are you doing, you wretched pirates? Scatter!
An angry but level voice cut through the din of my angst and the pirates' noises of encouragement. The smelly one removed his sword from my neck, and the hands holding me down released their pressure. I sat up, breathless, swallowing down the bit of bile that had invaded my throat. The mob around me dissipated, while a rather fearsome-looking man swashbuckled up to me, long dark hair billowing wildly in the wind, a quite distinctive hat upon his head, sporting a strange symbol on its front, a spherical shape with rings around it, like the pictures of some planets I'd seen in my extensive research. He gazed down at me curiously, and then angrily at the pirates who had backed away.
Ye worthless scallywags. Who in the hells is this, and why is he shackled on me ship?
His ship. The captain. Perhaps a more reasonable man, I hoped. The smelly one stepped forward.
Oh, we was just having a bit of fun, Captain, that's all.
The captain glowered at him.
Perrin, you better have a great excuse as to why I shouldn't throw ye overboard right now. Y'all better.
The pirates were silent now, the tension as thick as blood, no excuses to be claimed. I flinched as the captain took a step towards me.
Don't ye worry now, young man. Hops, unshackle the poor chap. Stand him up, give him some dignity.
A pirate, Hops, I assumed, did as the man ordered, and I sighed with relief, massaging the blood back into my arms, but still shivering. The captain then commanded Hops to retrieve a blanket. Once I was adequately draped, he led me into the ship's depths, to his very own captain's cabin, and away from the bloodthirsty pirates. He sat me down in a rickety chair, and I squinted in the darkness, unable to see much until my sight adjusted. He sat across from me at a desk, and sighed long.
I'm Captain Osoy,
the man said.
I must apologize on behalf of me despicable crew. They're great criminals, but when it comes to hosting, they've much to learn.
I did not know what to say, rather stunned after the trauma. After a moment, I cleared my raw throat and sputtered out. I appreciate your kindness, Captain.
Ah, he speaks. Well then, do tell me how you came to be on me ship. Let's start with your name, eh?
I gave it, but only told him I'd fallen from another vessel while attempting to get to land. I had no idea where I was, whether I was still in Hyrule, or if I'd phased into some other place. It certainly was not the Death Vale, unless I was completely mistaken about its appearance. However, the men here seemed just as alive as I, so I assumed it was not.
What vessel was that? Where are you headed? Perhaps we can get you there,
the captain proposed. I did not catch its name, sir. I was only attempting to travel from one place to another. My destination is unknown, if I am honest. It was the most I could conjure under my duress, and rather true.
Well, if it's purely land you're wanting to get to, we can surely arrange that. You seem like an adventurous lad. No home, no destination. You know, a pirate's life might actually suit you.
I gave him a half-hearted smile, and he chuckled.
I'm only kidding,
he promised.
This life ain't for everyone. Even the most cut out sometimes ain't that cut out.
He seemed to become lost in thought for a moment, memory flashing in his eyes, but then recovered.
We're heading to a newer settlement called Windfall. Should dock in about, 3 days. If you want, we can drop you there. In the meantime, you can sleep here. I'll take up the guest cabin.
He pointed to a meager bed against the wall. I do not mean to take your captain's quarters, sir.
Aye, that's exactly why you're gonna, savvy? I told ye, me crew has a lot to learn about hosting.
He left me with a charming wink, after finding some extra clothes for me to change into while my own dried. I wished to try phasing again, but the day's events had trained me so, I could not even summon the strength to sing. So one night of rest in the captain's quarters it would be. And then, in the morning, I would find the realm I was meant to find. If all went to plan, that is. And I was finding it so rarely did.
Rise and shine, Yoki. The day has dawned and we've a ship to sail.
Captain Osoy's crackling voice first thing in the morning was not at all one I wished to hear. I peeled my eyes open to a bright sunrise beaming through the faded, dirty portals of the ship. I groaned as I felt a soreness creeping into my limbs. The prior day's adventure had certainly caught up with me. The captain ordered me to ready myself and step outside to help the other pirates work the ship's sails. I sat aghast on the bed, reeling at the thought of putting myself through any sort of physical labor. I did not want to be roped into a pirate's life, not for anything. As he left the cabin, however, I realized I was behaving quite densely. I just needed to phase again. There was no need to play along anymore. Pirate's life be damned. While I wondered whether I should thank the captain once again for his rescuing me, I decided it would only complicate matters. If I stepped outside now, I'd risk never getting another moment alone. So instead, I resigned to accepting that I would not see the kind captain again. Settling into a meditative state after dressing in my now dry but stiff clothes, I hummed my song of phasing, feeling that familiar pulling of my insides. As I began to phase away, I opened my eyes to the sound of pounding boots, and at the last moment, saw Captain Osoy's startled reaction at my disappearing. I would have had a stronger response to his espying me, but the world around me dissolved and refigured itself into a completely new landscape, distracting me from such thoughts. This time, I rested on solid ground. The view before me took my breath away, but not in a deadly manner like before. It was autumn here. Golden, yellow, and orange leaves drifting on wisps of wind. The breeze cool and clean. A deep forest surrounding me, the trees huddled together as though for warmth. I had, yet again, phased to a place which I did not intend. It was becoming clearer to me now. These lines of time were just that. Time. I must move along them in order to reach the timeline source, where the Death Vale lay. However, I did not orient myself in the correct direction. I may phase forward, or not far back enough. I was learning, and thankfully my lack of experience had not yet killed me, though it had come close. I shut my eyes once more, a bit reluctantly as I rather wished to look upon this realm longer, and began to hum yet again, until, in one shocking second, a blast of freezing air whirled around me, and I felt something icy cold blanket me as I sat upon the ground. I halted my humming and opened my eyes to a most unexpected sight. Winter. Had I phased without noticing? The season was entirely new, but as I gazed around, I recognized the same exact huddling trees. I had not moved from the spot, but it seemed time had clearly moved either forward or back, or perhaps sideways. No strange pulling of my core had plagued me, however. I did not feel as though I had phased at all. As if in answer to my question, I caught the phenomena once more. Except this time, a bracing heat billowed around me, and the snow wholly disappeared in an instant. What in the gods was happening? I was not phasing. This much was clear. My body thawed from the freezing snow as the hot air surrounding me settled onto my skin, causing a sheen of sweat to break out across my form. This place was odd at best, terrifying at worst. Did people live here? Experience this flashing of seasons every day? Was this just normal? I knew I should leave it alone, continue to phase until experience turned to expertise, and I finally arrived at my intended destination. But I was just too curious. This realm seemed to bleed magic. What if I could utilize it? I rose from my seated position and wiped the sweat from my brow, almost wishing the season would shift back to the more temperate autumn. While the trees grew thick in this forest, I could just see the indications of houses through their leaves to the north of me, so north I headed. I must find out more about this place. As I crossed the threshold of the little town, I passed a faded sign reading Horon Village. The houses sat small and quaint, their thatched roofs steaming from the sudden change in temperature. Only a few people milled about, one exiting what seemed to be a jewelry shop. As I gazed around, I noticed a massive tree at the northeast edge of the village, perhaps the largest I'd ever seen. Was it just a trick of the sudden summer light, or did it have a face? I could not tell from the distant spot where I stood, but I swear I saw it blink. I shook my head. One oddity at a time, I thought. I decided to head towards the jewelry shop, where I knew I would find people to ask about this strange land. The thought of discovery enticed me more than I'd like to admit. But I had become a researcher of magics, and discovering one that eluded my foundation of knowledge incited something of a fire within me. Entered the jewelry shop, called Vasu's according to its sign. A man stood across from the shopkeeper as they discussed rings, and they spotted me, going silent. The shopkeeper's gaze turned from idle to seething.
Well, well,
he spat.
look who it is, all the way from Labrina. Finally tired of your sad shop owner life, eh, Mr. Creeps?
Who was this man? Did he recognize me? I'm sorry. Do we know each other?
Are you serious? You come in here the other day with that sneaky grin and your shady business trying to swindle me, and you have the guts to pretend you don't know me? You got about 10 seconds to leave my shop, bud.
Something wasn't right here. This man felt obviously hostile towards me. But why? I'd never before seen him in my life. I decided not to risk any further commotion, and bowed out of the jewelry shop, only to come face to face with a woman who gave me such a dirty look. I wondered what dream world I had fallen into. When the season swiftly transformed back to winter again, it took me not but a second to make a decision. I rushed away as the jewelry shop owner stepped outside of his door with his arms crossed, watching me. No reaction to the changing of seasons, and looking as though he wanted to rip my head clean off. Finding a dark shadow just inside the forest into which I'd first phased, I thought for a moment before beginning my song. It seemed these people recognized me, but perhaps not me exactly. Yes, I could feel him now, as I focused. A man who was me, but not me. I had jumped to another timeline, but not the one I'd felt branch weeks before. A third one. There were 3 versions of me, but I could not fathom how. There remained no more time to ponder it. Either way, I needed to phase in the right direction, along the appropriate line of time, in order to get to the Death Vale, and I needed to do it quickly. I focused, a determination washing over me. No longer would I allow any more delays or distractions. This was it. My core felt the tug. Reality bended, and then darkness. I stood on a spongy ground in total darkness. Wait. No, not total. I could see a tiny bit, and my eyes were already adjusting. I looked down at my feet and caught the pearlescent shimmer of a quite familiar pebble. A satisfied smile nearly split my head in two. I had done it. I had phased into the Death Vale. As I relished in my victory, I spied another white pebble just beyond the one I'd phased. Except it was moving. Now there appeared more, blinking to life in the darkness, bobbing and floating in midair, it seemed. As I realized what was happening, I also determined it was much too late to do anything about it. A dozen of the most heinous, mutated creatures, each the size of my head, and sporting sharp spikes upon their backs, their tongues lolling. Hundreds of bright white eyes, shining dangerously, began to crowd around me in a pack formation. They sprouted many long legs and warty green skin, glistening with a slimy substance that made me want to gag. My scream echoed across the mysterious landscape as they leaped towards me like spring-loaded spiders.
Chapter 4. The Clandestine Undead.
What in the hells did you do?
Saigo, sitting upon his throne, raised his eyebrows in a warning as Hamet barreled toward him in a fitful rage, her eyes bright with accusation.
Adjust your tone,
he said in a low, controlled voice.
I'll adjust nothing. What did you do to him?
Her wild hair seemed to stand on end with her emotion.
I know nothing of what you speak. Explain yourself. And if you address me that way again, I'll remove you from this realm, Hamet. Tread carefully.
She wisely heeded his advice, taking a moment to settle herself.
Yoki, I visited the timeline and he was gone.
What do you mean, gone?
I mean, gone. I could not feel his presence in the timeline at all. You've wanted him dead, Saigo. If you did something to him, confess, but know it would be a treachery beyond measure.
I haven't done anything to your precious Yoki, and if I had,
He stood menacingly, knowing he must establish his dominance before Hamet took matters into her own powerful hands.
I would have gladly admitted so.
Hamet's eyes narrowed in pure suspicion. Whether she believed him mattered not. He just wanted to bring her down a few pegs. The ego this goddess possessed.
Then why has he disappeared? Any theories, innocent god of death?
He would have known if Yoki had succumbed to an ending. He felt every single dead soul that entered his domain. All he had to do was focus for a second, and he'd be able to find him if he was here.
He's not in the Vale. Which means if he has left your timeline...
Realization transformed her hardened gaze.
Then he has discovered his ability.
Saigo watched as her expression evolved, from shock to concern, and then to awe and admiration. She would never learn.
This is your doing, Hamet. If Yoki discovers other timelines and disrupts the events within them, you risk the implosion of this realm. Whichever timeline he has entered, you may have to destroy, and all the magic within it will...
He did not wish to finish the statement. Magical timelines were literal lifelines for the Death Vale. Hamet was risking their very existence. She remained silent, surely the knowledge that she had caused this chaos finally sinking in.
You must find him. Ignoring this will risk everything. You must...
A sudden disturbance in the very fabric of the realm set him off balance. He stumbled forward, Hamet catching him and holding him upright.
What is it? What do you feel? Is it him? Has he perished?
She peered into his face with consternation. He could not help but allow his expression to reveal his horrified feelings. He slowly raised his eyes to meet hers, the recognition sinking in.
No, it is... life. Life in the Vale.
Mekai raised his arms into the air and felt the veil pull at his power. He sank his teeth into it, metaphorically speaking, and merged himself with its etheric core. The bodies wriggled beneath the ground at the intrusion, each buried only a few feet down so they could rise easily into the open dark. His creations, his most sublime design, Undeads. He disliked the name they'd been given by the surface world beings. It was so very uncouth, so undignified. They were magnificent creatures, given a half-life that just barely simmered, but enough to animate them, to make them move and stumble and scream. And they possessed power that could freeze a victim in their tracks, allowing the remarkable beasts to overcome their prey. As they slithered and seized out of their graves, Mekai watched with a fascination that seldom ebbed, like witnessing a child being born. His companion stepped up beside him, bowing low, and then watched the leathery forms writhe and twitch as they balanced themselves and ambled toward the powerful pair.
You honor me with this display, Master,
the companion said, practically drooling. He'd developed quite the fondness for Mekai in such a way as to concern the god. He often felt the man's stalking gaze on him, had sensed the inane, perverse thoughts coursing through his mind. But he hadn't yet stomped them out, for one day he might make use of the obsession.
They are spectacular, aren't they?
Mekai replied with a chuckle.
Just wait until you see them in action.
His companion grinned, tongue peeking from his lips for a moment like a snake. Mekai wasn't exactly enamored with the man, finding him rather odd, to be frank. But he was just the kind of wretched soul the god of balances required. Standing tall and wiry, his companion's pale, pasty skin glistened, and sharply cut white hair framed a pointed face that simply reeked of evil. He wore a red cape cut into shreds, and a gaudy, bright red diamond on his belt. Questionable fashion choices aside, He was an enigma of a being in truth, an accomplished villain who battled the very first hero and served the very first evil. Someone the three assumed would never again see the light of the sun. But Mekai planned to send Girahim back to the surface worlds one day. A day when the god of balances would see his own reign of those worlds finally come to fruition. The Redeads came to rest in front of the duo, looking to Mekai for orders with sleepy eyes. He counted them, 142. Not near enough. We will need more for our purposes, my liege. Mekai refrained from allowing his annoyance to show.
You've read my mind. We have work to do.
He raised a hand to the waiting beasts.
Sleep,
he commanded. They turned without hesitation and stumbled back toward their graves, digging themselves in without heed of any damage they might cause their forms. It was the only drawback to these half-dead beings. Their minds did not work as well as a living one, the result often bumping into things and each other, or simply standing unblinking and unthinking for hours on end. They must be commanded in order to do anything at all. But that was exactly the sort of unanimated mind that craved command. A blind mind. Malleable. Loyal. Mekai had sent his first 3 batches of Redeads into Hammet's favorite timeline during the Hyrulean Civil War. An experiment, a way to assess their capabilities as weapons. However, most of them perished once a certain pair of musically inclined brothers discovered a way to defeat them with magical song. Another drawback, Mekai supposed. But war did not come without trial and failure. And yes, he would keep trying. One day, his army would amass so greatly that no one, not even the wisest and most powerful of musicians, could conquer all of them. Redead's power thrived with numbers, and Mekai would create enough of them to overtake any threat. In addition, he had the unwitting help of the Hylians, who took such vain pride in their own wielding of power over the Sheikah with whom they warred that they stole many hundreds of Redeads and used them in their torturing of the very same people. This meant there was already a massive number of Redeads still in the timelines, still wreaking havoc, still killing. Some had even escaped from the prison in which the Hylians kept them, and they aimlessly roamed the lands at night. But again, it was not enough. Girahim and Mekai strode across the realm to the sacred spot where the gods performed their most formidable magics. A power-imbued place the 3 had supplied them for ritual and meditation. But Mekai did not use it for that. The 3 had created the gods to do their bidding, to carry out orders, and to arrange fates. But their refusal to interfere with all matters of the surface worlds did not garner them much respect from those very same gods. Yes, Mekai appreciated his own existence, which would not have come about without the 3, but he viewed them as little more than breeders. They arrived at the sacred space, a sprawling grassland shrouded in the Vale's darkness, yet bright with color, an oasis within the hellscape, though none of it was actually alive. This realm was a manifestation of death, a place the 3 made possible so that souls had a world in which to retire before the beyond. Mekai found it rather pointless, but it was his home. He had not yet laid eyes on the surface worlds, but he'd heard tell from Hammet of their beauty. The chatty goddess could always be relied upon to inform, even when she shouldn't. And one day he would see those worlds. One day, he would rule them. He could feel Girahim's giddiness rising. The villain's eyes sparkled, and he clapped his hands in anticipation. Mekai resisted the urge to roll his eyes, at least empathizing that the process he was about to trigger was indeed a fascinating sight. He withdrew the object with which he would perform the spell a quite beautiful, albeit sinister thing. Heart-shaped, wooden and painted with care, spikes along its edges, huge orange eyes staring, yet unseeing. A mask. He swore he could hear a faint whisper coming from it, saying,
"Consume everything."
But he ignored it. When Mekai had first shown it to Girahim, the insane villain had almost placed it upon his own face. Mekai had to rip it from his foolish grasp and explain why that was a terrible idea. The mask was imbued with an evil spirit, one that took possession over anyone who donned it. The tribe who crafted it had trapped the soul of a man within, a man called Majora, as punishment for unknown transgressions. In life, Majora possessed power untold, magic that allowed him to turn himself into a weapon, the caliber of which resulted in mass destruction. His spirit now inhabited the mask and saturated the wood with a dangerous level of power. When Mekai had retrieved it from the same prison where Girahim's spirit had been locked away, he'd realized its potential. It had many uses, both destructive and productive, and he now used it to raise the dead.
"Your innovation astonishes me,"
Girahim praised, watching wide-eyed as Mekai raised the mask into the air and closed his eyes to begin the process.
"I will never follow another."
Admittedly, it felt good to be honored in this way. Saigo certainly never saw Mekai's worth, nor did the other gods. The thought of him rarely even crossed their minds. But they would see, eventually, his wrath and his capability. They would have no choice but to see it. Girahim in particular recognized Mekai's talent instantly. He had followed a demise in another life, one of the first evils that ever plagued the surface worlds, bringing war to those lands and causing the gods to adjust their perspectives. Girahim spoke of demise often at first, but as Mekai established his own mastery over this incredible magic, the villain ceased to care as much about his prior master. Now he served only Mekai, and the god had promised him the spoils of war in return. Majora's mask began to glow orange, and then red, heating up in Mekai's palms. Strange ripples of darkness seeped from the mask's spikes, weaving together and outward across the plains of the Vale, the only indication that anything was amiss. As the power emanated, Mekai felt it begin to pull from the realm. Poes from all over were magnetized, their wavering flames flickering. But he knew to keep the level of power stabilized, only allowing it to steal some of the spirit's essences and redirecting them into the ground, where the mask then burst forth with a blooming of vitality, diffusing and combining life and death into a distinctive and unprecedented blend. The Redeads formed beneath the ground, sucking nutrients from the Vale's foundation to build their bodies and powering them with the essence of Pose. As the mask's light faded, Mekai almost collapsed with exhaustion. Girahim caught him and held him firmly, almost lovingly, in his grasp, grinning like a serpent.
"That was a good one, Master.
Oh, you just crafted hundreds of them, didn't you?" His chest heaved with passion as he spoke. Mekai sighed with fatigue and relief, euphoria thrumming through his form as the magic faded.
Yes, this time it felt more profound. Our army is growing, Girahim. The surface worlds will see it soon.
Girahim opened his snake-like mouth to respond, but the ground suddenly shook for a moment, and Mekai felt the air of the Vale shift as though something had taken up space within it. Something that should not be there. The villain felt it as well, gazing about with suspicious eyes.
"What is that?"
Mekai frowned. recognizing that something deeply disturbing had occurred, more disturbing even than what he had just done.
Something is here.
He explained with foreboding.
The Vale has a visitor.
Next time on Master of Mirth.
A rumbling shook the ground, a deep growl emanating from the rippling wall, which I now understood was not a wall in the slightest. The beast raised a spindly leg into the air and slammed it down onto my chest. I let out a whoosh of breath, grunting in pain.
Seems you've gotten yourself into a tangle, hero.
Intentions.
Before I could call out a cold greeting to Hamet, the mother of all my problems, the bald man touched my forehead and my world went black.
This is your mess, Hamet! Clean it up!
Good morning, my Yoki.
It does not matter what prisons hold me back. It does not matter how strong you are, how much you leech from me, how you threaten me. Hamet, I will avenge my brother.
Why do you want to see the God of Life? His power is privilege to those who deserve it. And you do not.
It is an honor to meet you, Yoki. I've heard much of your inspiring life.
She saw it in his very spirit, the reason he was here. It was the only reason he would want to know so very badly that he risked his life to come to the Vale.
I would like to show you something, Yoki.